The lawyer slid a thick document across the mahogany table. My husband Walter sat there with his chest puffed out like he'd already won. Next to him, my daughter-in-law Shanice had the nerve to be sitting there too, wearing my favorite perfume. The same perfume she'd been wearing a week ago when I walked into my own bedroom and saw her wrapped up in my sheets with my husband. I didn't scream that day. I didn't cry. I just backed out of that room quiet as a mouse and let them think I never saw a thing. Now, sitting in this lawyer's office, watching Walter's attorney smile like the devil himself, I knew what was coming. This wasn't a divorce meeting. This was an ambush. "Mrs. Washington," the lawyer said, tapping the papers with his gold pen. "As you can see here, your husband is entitled to the house, the savings, and the rental properties. Given that you haven't worked in 40 years and the assets were acquired during the marriage through his income, the court finds—" "I see," I said softly. I picked up the document. My hands didn't shake even though my heart was racing. I read every single word while they watched me. Walter couldn't even look me in the eye. Shanice was staring at her nails like this was boring her. Then I smiled. That smile made Walter nervous. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened. "Is there a problem?" his lawyer asked. "No problem at all," I said, still smiling. "No problem at all." What I did next? Well, that's when the real show began. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand how I got to that lawyer's office with a smile on my face while my whole world was supposedly falling apart. My name is Evelyn Washington, and I'm 68 years old. I've been married to Walter Washington for 45 years. We raised 3 children in a little house in Detroit that we turned into a beautiful home. I was a good wife. I cooked every meal from scratch. I kept our home spotless. I raised our babies and supported Walter through every struggle, every job change, every dream that didn't work out, and every dream that did. Walter worked in manufacturing for 30 years before he retired. We were comfortable, not rich, but comfortable. We had the house paid off, 2 rental properties that brought in steady income, and a nice amount in savings. Our 3 children were grown and gone, living their own lives. Our oldest, Devin, married Shanice 12 years ago. They have 2 beautiful grandbabies, Amari and Zara. Those babies are my heart. 10 and 8 years old, smart as whips, and they love their grandma Evie more than anything. For years, everything seemed fine. We had Sunday dinners after church. We celebrated holidays together. I watched my grandbabies while Devin and Shanice worked. I thought we were a blessed family. But about 2 years ago, things started changing. Walter started acting different. He'd snap at me over little things. He stopped holding my hand at church. He started spending more time out of the house, claiming he needed to check on the rental properties or meet up with his old work buddies. I felt it in my spirit that something was wrong, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. Then Shanice started coming around more often without Devin. She'd drop by during the day when Walter was home, saying she needed to borrow something or wanted to check on us. She started dressing different when she came over, more makeup, tighter clothes. I'm not stupid. I saw the way she looked at him. I saw the way he looked at her. But I didn't want to believe it. This was my son's wife, my grandbaby's mother. And Walter? We'd been together since we were 23 years old. Surely he wouldn't do this to me. Surely she wouldn't do this to Devin. I prayed about it. Every night, I got down on my knees and asked God to remove these thoughts from my mind if they were wrong, or to show me the truth if they were right. God answered. 3 weeks ago, I came home early from my book club meeting at church. The meeting got canceled because Sister Patricia's daughter went into labor, and we all wanted to head to the hospital to support her. But I told the ladies I'd meet them there after I stopped home to get the baby blanket I'd been crocheting. I pulled into the driveway and saw Shanice's car parked on the street. That was strange. She hadn't mentioned she was coming by, and I knew Devin was at work. The front door was unlocked. I walked in and the house was quiet. Too quiet. I heard sounds coming from upstairs. Soft music playing. I recognized it. The old Luther Vandross songs Walter and I used to listen to when we were young. My heart started pounding, but my feet kept moving. I walked up those stairs like I was in a dream. Or a nightmare. The bedroom door was cracked open just a little bit. And there they were. My husband of 45 years. My daughter-in-law of 12 years. In my bed, on my sheets, under my wedding quilt that my grandmother had made with her own 2 hands. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Shanice had her eyes closed. Walter had his back to the door. Neither of them knew I was there. I could have screamed. I could have run in there and caused a scene. But something in me went cold and quiet. A voice in my head, maybe God, maybe my own survival instinct, told me to be still. So I backed away, slow and silent. I went back downstairs, out the door, and sat in my car. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I cried for about 5 minutes, deep, gulping sobs that made my chest hurt. Then I wiped my face, fixed my makeup in the mirror, and drove to the hospital to see Sister Patricia's new grandbaby. I smiled and cooed over that beautiful infant, like my heart wasn't shattered into a million pieces. I held it together, because that's what I've always done. That's what women like me do. We survive. When I got home 2 hours later, Shanice's car was gone. Walter was in the living room watching television like nothing had happened. He smiled at me and asked how the baby was. I told him beautiful, just beautiful, and went to start dinner. That night, I stripped the bed and washed everything. Walter asked why I was doing laundry so late. I told him I'd spilled some lotion on the sheets earlier. He didn't question it. For the next week, I watched them. I paid attention to everything. The way Walter would check his phone and smile at certain messages. The way Shanice would find excuses to call the house when she knew I'd be at church or out shopping. The way they'd look at each other during Sunday dinner, thinking nobody noticed. I noticed everything. And then, exactly 1 week after I caught them, Walter sat me down at the kitchen table and told me he wanted a divorce. He didn't say why at first. He just said he wasn't happy anymore, that we'd grown apart, that he wanted different things in life. He said it so calm, like he was discussing what to have for dinner, like he hadn't just destroyed 45 years with one conversation. I asked him if there was someone else. He looked me dead in my face and said no. He lied to me without even blinking. Okay, I said, just like that. Okay. He looked surprised. I think he expected me to beg or cry or fight. But I'd already done my crying in that car 3 weeks ago. Now I was thinking, planning. I want to do this fair, he said. We'll split everything 50-50. The house, the savings, the rental properties. You'll be taken care of, Evelyn. I promise. I nodded. When do you want to start the process? I already talked to a lawyer, he said. We can meet next week to go over everything. Of course he'd already talked to a lawyer. He'd been planning this. They'd been planning this. That Sunday at church, I did something I rarely do. Instead of sitting with Walter like always, I sat with my friend Dorothy near the back. Dorothy's been my friend since high school. She knows me better than almost anyone. After service, we went to lunch at Mama Lou's, our favorite soul food spot. Over fried chicken and collard greens, I told her everything. Dorothy's eyes got wider and wider as I talked. Girl, no, she kept saying. Not Walter, not Shanice. Please tell me you're wrong. I wish I was, I said, but I saw them with my own eyes. Dorothy grabbed my hand across the table. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm not going to just roll over and let them destroy me. I've given 45 years to that man. I helped him build everything he has. And Shanice? She's betraying my son, breaking up our family, and she thinks she's going to ride off into the sunset with my husband and my money? Not if I can help it. Dorothy squeezed my hand tighter. What do you need from me? A good lawyer, I said. The best one you know. Dorothy smiled. I know just the person. My nephew Jerome. He's a divorce attorney downtown. He's expensive, but he's worth every penny. He doesn't lose. She called him right there at the restaurant, told him it was an emergency. Jerome said he could see me the next day. That Monday, I met with Jerome Carter at his office. He was a sharp young man, probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes but a firm handshake. I told him everything. About catching Walter and Shanice, about the divorce, about how I suspected Walter was going to try to take everything. Jerome listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Washington, I'm going to be straight with you. In Michigan, marital assets are usually split 50-50 in a divorce. But there are exceptions, especially in cases involving adultery and deception. What concerns me is that you said he's already hired a lawyer and set up a meeting. That tells me he's trying to move fast, probably hoping you'll just sign whatever he puts in front of you. That's exactly what he's hoping, I said. We're not going to let that happen, Jerome said. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to act normal. Don't let Walter know you've hired me. Don't let him know you're suspicious. Can you do that? I thought about standing in that doorway watching my husband betray me and walking away without making a sound. I can do that. Good. Because we need time to gather evidence and build a case. In the meantime, I want you to start documenting everything. Every time he's gone from the house, every phone call, every suspicious behavior. And if possible, try to get proof of the affair. What kind of proof? Photos, messages, anything concrete. Do you have access to his phone or computer? I shook my head. He's been keeping his phone locked lately. What about financial records? Bank statements? Property documents? We have a filing cabinet in the basement with everything. Perfect. I need copies of all of it, especially anything showing how assets were acquired and when. If we can prove that you contributed to building these assets, even as a homemaker, that strengthens your position. I spent the next week being the perfect wife while secretly copying every document I could find. Bank statements going back 20 years, property deeds, tax returns, insurance policies. I'd wait until Walter left the house. Then I'd go down to the basement and make copies at the library up the street. I kept everything in a folder hidden in Dorothy's house. I also started paying more attention to Walter's patterns. He'd leave the house every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, claiming he was meeting his friend Leon to play cards. But I called Leon's wife, and she told me Leon had moved to Florida 6 months ago. So where was Walter really going? On Thursday, I decided to find out. I told Walter I was going to visit my sister in Ann Arbor for the day. Instead, I parked down the street and waited. Sure enough, at 2 o'clock, Walter left the house. I followed him. He drove straight to the Riverside Apartments, one of our rental properties. But instead of checking on the building like he claimed, he went to Unit 3B and used a key to let himself in. I sat in my car with my heart pounding. 30 minutes later, Shanice's car pulled into the parking lot. She went straight to Unit 3B without knocking. The door opened immediately. Walter was waiting for her. I took photos of everything. Her car, the apartment number, the timestamps. I sat there for 2 hours until she left, then waited another 30 minutes before Walter came out. I took more photos. When I got home that evening, Walter was already there. "How was your sister?" he asked. "Good," I said. "She's doing real good." I sent all the photos to Jerome that night. He called me the next morning. "This is perfect, Mrs. Washington. This is exactly what we needed. Now, about this divorce meeting next week, I want you to go. I want you to listen to what they propose. But don't sign anything. Tell them you need time to think about it. That you want to have your own lawyer look it over. Can you do that?" "I can do that." The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. The night before, I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything we'd built together. The house we'd saved for, the rental properties we'd bought when the market crashed, using our life savings as a down payment. I'd been there for all of it, supporting every decision, trusting Walter to do right by us. and now he was going to try to take it all and leave me with nothing. Tuesday morning, I got up and got dressed like I was going to church. I put on my navy blue suit, the one I wore for special occasions. I did my makeup careful and neat. I wanted to look dignified, strong. Walter was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his tie and clearing his throat. "You ready?" he asked. "I'm ready." We drove to the lawyer's office in silence. That's when I noticed Shanice's car already in the parking lot. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face calm. We went inside, and that's when I saw her, sitting in the waiting room like she had every right to be there. She had the decency to look uncomfortable when she saw me, but not uncomfortable enough to leave. "What is she doing here?" I asked Walter. "She's here for moral support," he said. "For me." I almost laughed at the audacity. Instead, I just nodded and sat down, putting 2 empty chairs between us. When Walter's lawyer called us back, Shanice stood up too. That's when I knew for sure this was bigger than I'd thought. They'd planned this together, all of it. And that's how I ended up in that conference room, watching that lawyer slide those papers across the table. Papers that gave Walter everything and left me with almost nothing. "Your husband has been generous," the lawyer said. "He's willing to give you $50,000 as a settlement and allow you to keep your car. Given that you haven't worked in 40 years and have no independent income, this is quite fair." $50,000. For 45 years of marriage. For 3 children I'd raised. For the meals I'd cooked and the home I'd kept and the support I'd given. For the life savings I'd agreed to invest in rental properties that were now worth over $800,000. I looked at Walter. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Shanice. She was smiling just a little bit. She thought she'd won. Then I looked back at the lawyer and smiled my own smile. "I need to think about this," I said calmly. "I'll need to have my own lawyer review these papers." Walter's lawyer frowned. "Mrs. Washington, I assure you everything here is standard and legal. There's really no need to drag this out with another lawyer. The longer this takes, the more expensive it becomes for everyone." "That may be," I said, gathering my purse, "but I'm going to have someone look at it anyway. I'll be in touch." I stood up. Walter finally looked at me, and I saw something in his face. Fear? Uncertainty? Good. "Evelyn, wait," he started. "I'll be in touch," I repeated, and walked out of that office with my head held high. I drove straight to Jerome's office. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was from rage. "They tried to give me $50,000, I told Jerome, throwing the papers on his desk. "Everything we built together, and they're trying to give me $50,000 and a car." Jerome read through the papers, his jaw getting tighter with each page. Finally, he looked up at me. "Mrs. Washington, I'm going to be honest with you. This isn't just unfair. This is fraud. These papers claim that all marital assets were acquired solely through your husband's income, and that you made no contributions to the marriage. That's a lie, and we can prove it. But what makes this worse is the timing. They're trying to rush this through before you can mount a proper defense." "What do we do?" Jerome smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just been handed a winning case. "We fight back. And Mrs. Washington, we're going to win." That was 3 days ago. Now I'm sitting in my living room, waiting for Walter to come home. Jerome has filed a response to the divorce petition, one that tells the real story. One that includes the photos of Walter and Shanice. One that demands a fair division of assets and compensation for adultery and attempted fraud. Walter doesn't know yet. His lawyer probably just got the papers today. Any minute now, Walter's phone is going to ring, and his whole plan is going to fall apart. I hear his car in the driveway. I hear his key in the lock. I'm sitting in my favorite chair, the one by the window, with a cup of tea and my Bible in my lap. He walks in and looks at me. His phone starts ringing immediately. He looks at the caller ID and his face goes pale. "Hello?" he answers. He listens for a minute, then 2 minutes. His eyes get wider. His hand starts shaking. "What do you mean she has photos?" he says. "What do you mean, fraud charges?" He looks at me, really looks at me. And for the first time in 45 years, Walter Washington realizes he has no idea who I am. I take a sip of my tea and smile. "Hi, honey," I say sweetly. "How was your day?" His phone falls from his hand and hits the floor. And that's when my real plan begins. Walter picked up his phone from the floor with shaking hands. He ended the call with his lawyer and just stared at me. I could see his mind working, trying to figure out what I knew and how much trouble he was in. "Evelyn, we need to talk," he finally said. "Oh, now you want to talk?" I set my teacup down gently. "Funny how that works. You didn't want to talk when you were sneaking around with our son's wife. You didn't want to talk when you were planning to steal everything we built together. But now that you're caught, now you want to talk." "I can explain. I don't want to hear it, Walter. I saw you. 3 weeks ago, I came home early and I saw you with Shanice in our bed, on my grandmother's quilt." My voice cracked, just a little on that last part, but I kept going. "I know about the apartment. I know about all the lies. And now my lawyer knows too." Walter sat down heavy on the couch, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to protect myself. Long enough to get proof. Long enough to make sure you don't get away with this." "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "What do I want?" I stood up, and I felt taller than I had in years. "I want what's mine. I want the fair half of everything we built together. I want you out of this house by the end of the week. And I want you to understand that you didn't just lose a wife, Walter. You lost your family. Your son is going to find out what you did. Your grandchildren are going to know who you really are. And Shanice? She's going to lose everything too." "You can't tell Devin," Walter said, panic in his voice now. "It'll destroy him. Think about the kids." "I am thinking about the kids. I'm thinking about how they deserve better than a grandmother who betrays their father and a grandfather who helps her do it. And yes, Devin will be hurt. But he deserves to know the truth. You should have thought about destroying him before you slept with his wife." Walter put his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered seeing them together, and that feeling disappeared like smoke. "Get out," I said. "Go stay wherever you've been spending your Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You have until Friday to get your things." He left without another word. I locked the door behind him, and then I finally let myself cry. Not because I wanted him back, but because 45 years was over, and even though he'd destroyed it, it still hurt to let it go. I called Dorothy. She came over with a bottle of wine and Sister Patricia from church. We sat in my living room, and they held me while I cried and prayed and raged and cried some more. That's what real family does. They show up when your world is falling apart, and they help you hold the pieces. The next morning, I did something I'd been dreading. I called my son Devin. He answered on the second ring, happy and unsuspecting. "Hey, Ma, what's up?" "Baby, I need you to come over, today if you can, and come alone." Something in my voice must have told him this was serious because he said, "I'll be there in an hour." When Devin walked through the door, I saw the worry on his face. He's 39 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a little boy who knew something bad was coming. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed him breakfast before school every day for 18 years. I held his hands and I told him everything. About walking in on his father and his wife. About the divorce papers that tried to cheat me. About the apartment and the lies and all of it. I watched my son's heart break right in front of me. He cried like I hadn't seen him cry since he was small. He got angry. So angry he punched the wall and put a hole in it. Then he cried some more. "Where are my kids?" he finally asked. "Are they safe?" "They're at school," I said. They don't know anything, and we're going to make sure they're protected through all of this. That's the most important thing." "I'm going to kill him," Devin said. "I'm going to kill both of them." "No, you're not," I said firmly. "You're going to be smart. You're going to get your own lawyer. You're going to document everything for your custody case. And you're going to show those babies that when people hurt you, you don't sink to their level. You rise above it." Devin stayed with me for 3 hours. We cried together. We prayed together. And slowly, I watched him go from broken to determined. That's what happens when you're raised right. You learn that you can survive anything. That evening, Devin went home and confronted Shanice. I know because she called me, screaming and crying, saying I'd destroyed her marriage and turned her husband against her. The nerve of that woman. I hung up on her and blocked her number. The legal battle that followed was ugly. Walter's lawyer tried every trick in the book to paint me as a vindictive wife who was making up stories. But Jerome was better. He had the photos. He had the financial records showing how I'd contributed to acquiring the rental properties, how I'd inherited money from my mother and put it into our investments, how I'd worked part-time for years before the kids were born, and my income had helped buy our first house. He also had something else. Testimonies from people who'd seen Walter and Shanice together. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had seen Shanice's car at our house multiple times during the day when I wasn't home. The property manager at the Riverside Apartments confirmed that Walter had been using Unit 3B as a personal apartment for the past 6 months, and that he'd been seen there regularly with a woman matching Shanice's description. It all came out in court, and it was humiliating for everyone. But I held my head high. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. The judge was a black woman in her 50s named Judge Althea Moore. She listened to everything with a stern face, and when Walter's lawyer tried to argue that adultery shouldn't affect the division of assets, she shut him down quick. "Counselor," she said coldly, "when one party commits adultery and then attempts to defraud the other party out of their rightful share of marital assets, this court absolutely takes that into consideration. Your client didn't just break his marriage vows. He tried to steal from his wife of 45 years. I will not reward that behavior." The final judgment came down 6 weeks later. I got the house. I got one of the rental properties. I got half of the savings and half of Walter's pension. Walter got the other rental property and his half of the savings. But here's the thing that made it beautiful. He also got massive legal fees because the judge ruled that his attempt at fraud meant he had to pay both his lawyer and mine. But that's not even the best part. Devin filed for divorce from Shanice immediately. And because she'd committed adultery and abandoned the marriage, she got almost nothing. No house, minimal child support, and very limited custody of Amari and Zara. The judge said any mother who would betray her children's father the way she did showed poor judgment and couldn't be trusted with primary custody. Shanice's whole world fell apart. She'd been working part-time at a salon, but that wasn't enough to afford her own place. She'd thought she'd move in with Walter and live off his money, but Walter's money wasn't enough for 2 people anymore, not with all the legal fees and the fair division of assets. And here's what nobody expected. Walter didn't want her anymore. Once the affair stopped being exciting and secret, once it cost him his family and his money and his reputation, he didn't want her. He told her he needed time alone to figure things out. Translation: he realized he'd destroyed his life for nothing. So Shanice, who'd been living in a nice 4-bedroom house with my son, ended up having to move back in with her mother in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment across town. Her mother, Miss Gloria, called me one day to apologize. She was crying, saying she'd raised her daughter better than this and she was so ashamed. "I don't blame you, Gloria," I told her. "You did your best. Sometimes people make their own choices and we can't stop them." Walter ended up having to sell the rental property he got just to pay his legal bills. He moved into a small apartment, the kind he'd sworn he'd never live in again after working so hard to build something better. He tried to reach out to Devin, tried to apologize. But Devin wouldn't speak to him. Neither would our other 2 children, Marcus and Lorraine, once they found out what he'd done. I saw Walter one time after everything was final. It was at the grocery store. He looked older, tired, like the weight of what he'd done was crushing him. He saw me and started to walk over, but I turned my cart around and went the other way. I had nothing to say to him. The house felt different after Walter left. At first it felt too empty, too quiet. But slowly, it started to feel like mine. I rearranged the furniture. I painted the bedroom a color I'd always wanted. I got a new quilt, one that was just mine. Dorothy started coming over for Sunday dinners. Sister Patricia and I started a prayer group that met in my living room every Wednesday. And my grandbabies, Amari and Zaras, they came over even more than before. Devin had primary custody, and on the nights he had to work late, they stayed with me. We'd make cookies and watch movies and do homework at the kitchen table. They asked about their grandfather once. "Why doesn't Grandpa Walter come around anymore?" Amari asked. She was 10 and smart enough to know something was wrong. I thought carefully about how to answer. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they love. Your grandpa made some big mistakes, and right now, he needs to think about what he did. But that doesn't change how much I love you or how much your daddy loves you. You're going to be okay, baby. We're all going to be okay. She nodded and went back to her homework. Kids are resilient like that. They adapt. As long as they have people who love them and keep them safe, they find a way through. 3 months after the divorce was final, I did something I'd never done before. I took a trip. Dorothy and I went to New Orleans for a week. We ate amazing food, listened to jazz music, walked through the French Quarter, and laughed until our sides hurt. I felt young again. Free. On our last night there, we were sitting at a cafe watching the sunset over the Mississippi River. Dorothy raised her glass of wine. "To new beginnings," she said. "To new beginnings," I repeated. "How are you really doing?" she asked me. "And don't give me the church answer. Tell me the truth." I thought about it. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. Some days are hard. Some days I miss what I thought I had, even though I know now it was a lie. But mostly, I feel lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I forgot it was there, and now I've finally put it down. What about Walter? Do you think he regrets it? I think he regrets getting caught, I said. I think he regrets losing his money and his family. But do I think he regrets betraying me? Honestly, Dorothy, I don't care anymore. That's his burden to carry, not mine. When I got back home, there was a letter waiting for me. It was from Walter. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was long and rambling. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know what he was thinking. He said Shanice had seduced him and he'd been weak. He blamed his age, a midlife crisis, fear of getting older. He blamed everything except himself. At the end, he wrote, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. You were a good wife, Evelyn, the best wife. I threw away something precious and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. If there's any way we could try again, I would do anything to make it right." I read that letter 3 times. Then I did something that felt better than anything had felt in months. I tore it into tiny pieces and threw it in the trash. Walter had his chance. He had 45 years of chances. He chose to throw it all away for a cheap affair with our son's wife, and now he was facing the consequences. That wasn't my problem anymore. A few weeks later, I got news through the church grapevine. Walter had lost his apartment because he couldn't afford the rent after his legal bills piled up. He was staying with his brother in a cramped house on the east side, sleeping on a couch at 69 years old. Shanice had lost her job at the salon after word got around about what she'd done. In the Black community, especially in church circles, that kind of betrayal doesn't get forgotten. People stopped supporting her business. She ended up having to take a job at a call center making barely above minimum wage. The 2 rental properties they'd thought they'd live off of? Gone. The comfortable retirement they'd planned together? Gone. The respect of their community? gone. Everything they'd schemed and lied and betrayed people for had disappeared like smoke. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I started taking classes at the community college, something I'd always wanted to do. I joined a book club. I volunteered at the church's food pantry. I spent time with my grandchildren and watched them grow into beautiful, smart, kind young people, despite everything they'd been through. Devin met someone new, a wonderful woman named Kendra who worked as a nurse. She was kind to Amari and Zara, and she treated my son with the respect and love he deserved. They got engaged 6 months after they started dating. At the engagement party, Devin pulled me aside. "Mom, I want to thank you," he said. "For what, baby?" "For being strong, for showing me what real strength looks like. When this first happened, I wanted to give up. I wanted to fall apart. But you showed me that we don't do that. We fight. We survive. We build something better. You taught me that." I hugged my son tight and cried happy tears. This is what victory looks like. Not revenge, but rebuilding. Not bitterness, but becoming stronger. Not holding on to people who hurt you, but letting them go and watching them face the consequences of their own choices. Last Sunday, I was at church and I saw Walter slip in the back. He looked rough, wearing an old suit that didn't fit right anymore. He sat alone. Nobody went to greet him. Nobody shook his hand. The community he'd been part of for 40 years had turned their backs on him. Not because I'd asked them to, but because what he did was wrong, and everyone knew it. After service, as I was leaving with Dorothy and Sister Patricia, Walter tried to approach me in the parking lot. Before he could say anything, Devin stepped between us. "She has nothing to say to you," Devin told his father. "Neither do I. You made your choice. Now live with it." Walter looked at his son, then at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. But I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just peace. I got in my car and drove home to my house, the one that was all mine now. I made myself a nice dinner. I called Dorothy and we laughed about something silly. I read my grandbabies a bedtime story over video chat. And that night, I slept better than I had in years. The cheaters didn't just end up homeless in the physical sense, though that was part of it. They ended up homeless in every way that mattered. No family to support them, no community to embrace them, no peace in their hearts. They'd traded everything real for something fake. And now they had nothing. Me? I had everything that mattered. My children, my grandchildren, my friends, my faith, my dignity, my peace. And that's worth more than any house or any amount of money or any lying, cheating man could ever be worth. I'm 68 years old, and I'm starting over. And you know what? It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.